Again, I said thank you to many of you for coming. I'll say it to all of you now. Thanks for taking the time tonight. Appreciate the drive. We're here about really working smart in our Catholic schools. And we have a very knowledgeable expert who's spent 30 years of his life. I see a lot of you have come back to hear him speak again. He has a lot of wisdom for us. And again, it's to help the kids and to work smart. I would like to begin by opening with a prayer. Yesterday I was at the Divine Mercy Sunday celebration in our cathedral. It's a beautiful, beautiful prayer. And in Catholic schools, it seems to me, in the springtime, we've kind of gotten on each other's nerves for almost a whole year now. And we need forgiveness from each other. We need mercy. And so I'm just going to read the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, someone who totally understood forgiveness. And I'll read that, then we'll say a Hail Mary together. That'll start the meeting. All right? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. For it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. So it is through the generosity of a grant from the Catholic Extension Foundation that we are able to have Richard Burke's company, and Richard Burke himself, be with us for 4 years, Catholic school management. You know that he has this over 30 years of experience, and I guarantee he's going to put us to work. It's going to be challenging, but it's going to make our schools better. Richard, thanks.
Oh, I have to work too? Oh, I thought I was here. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome. Happy Easter to you all, and thank you so much for coming back to be with us. Is this working? Can you hear me out? No. You will, as Mark indicated, get more work out of this, but as a parent who sent children through Catholic elementary school, Catholic high school, college, and grad school, and paid a lot of tuition, the work that you're doing is incredibly important to these schools, and I thank you sincerely for that. Tonight we're going to concentrate primarily on enhancing communications programs for Catholic schools from a number of different perspectives. But I need to know a little bit more about you before I get into this. How many of you have been here for the other seminar that I did, particularly the one on strategic planning? Okay, third. How many of you have never been to any of the seminars that I've done here? This is your first time, and you came on faith of some sort. Okay, a number of you. And how many came to the seminar on the role of the professional educator in marketing the Catholic school? Just a couple. Okay, so for some of you, if you've been here before, some of this in the early section will be a repeat, a refresher, if you will. And for those of you seeing the first time, if you want to stop me going through this, please do that. I won't lose track. If you want to ask me a question and get me off track, that's okay. I will find my way back to what we're supposed to be talking about. I can do this as a monologue for the next 4 hours. We're supposed to be finished by 10, right? No? Earlier? But I would rather, as we get into the work of this evening, make this a little bit more of a dialogue and answer the questions and perhaps some of the concerns that you might have for your individual schools. And I thank Vicki for working this so I don't have to keep going back to the computer. In the notebook that you have, is a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that I'll be going through. Feel free to mark that up and again stop me as we go through. Basically what we're going to do tonight is a little bit of an overview of development. Again, some of you have heard this before. I want to make sure, however, that you understand development and how these pieces fit together. We're going to talk about the role of committees in the Catholic elementary school in enhancing both development and communications programs. And then we're going to look at the specific components of a communication program as designed specifically for a Catholic elementary school. Oh, one more. Okay. Just for those of you who have not been with us before, to give you a little bit of perspective, the Catholic elementary schools in the United States, of which there are 6,000 right now, actually began in 1884 at the Third Plenary Council of the American Catholic Bishops at Baltimore. That was, of course, the council that produced, remember, the Baltimore Catechism? That you gotta remember. After they approved the Baltimore Catechism, the bishops turned their attention to Catholic schools and issued 4 mandate statements. Anybody remember what they were from the earlier seminars? Adam?
Each parish needed a school.
Yes, that's one.
That's the one I remember.
Good, great start, great start. Adam, I thought you were going to have the whole
This
thing.
is a group thing. We gotta.
That's right.
Every pastor was required to build and maintain a school or be removed from the church. Parishioners were obliged to assist the parish priest in the building and maintenance of a Catholic school, and Catholic parents were obliged to educate their children in Catholic schools. So it was a church whose educational system was based upon mandates and obligations. That, of course, began to change in 1964. What happened that year? Second Vatican Council, and those of you who watched any of the festivities from Sunday, I'm sure heard a little bit about that from Pope John the 23rd. It was also that year that we began to see closing. That was the largest year for Catholic schools in the United States. School year 1964-65, there were 15,300 Catholic schools in the United States. Contrast that today to 6,000. Dramatic numbers of closing. In 1972, in response to the beginnings of those closings, the National Catholic Educational Association suggested that all schools implement development programs and that they take a much more active role in marketing Catholic schools for their families. The next slide will take us then to 1973, when Catholic School Management was founded. Our initial name was the NCEA Field Consulting Services, and we remained that way until 1985. If you're wondering where all of this babble and hot air from the front of the room is coming from, most of the theoretical basis for what I'm going to talk with you tonight comes out of a book by Kotler and Fox called Strategic Marketing for Educational Institutions. Now, this is not a James Patterson novel. This will put you to sleep. But Strategic Marketing for Educational Institutions was written, co-authored by these. Philip Kotler is kind of a guru of not-for-profit organization marketing in the United States. He's taught for over 30 years at Harvard. Karen Fox was a doctoral student of Philip Kotler's, and while she was completing her doctorate, she did her internship at Catholic School Management. So most of the examples in Strategic Marketing for Educational Institutions are from the Catholic elementary and secondary schools that she worked with around the country with us. So we've had the benefit of not only helping design the theory, but then tracking the progress of some 3,000 Catholic schools over the course of these last 38 years. Next slide. I say all of that by way of suggesting that today we've moved far away from mandates for Catholic education in the church. There are very few bishops anywhere saying you will have Catholic schools available for all of your children. Parents have to educate them. They're not saying that anymore. We've moved to a church whose current pastoral on education, which is entitled To Teach as Jesus Did, opens its section on Catholic schools by saying, quote, "Of the educational alternatives available to the Catholic community, Catholic schools provide the fullest and best opportunity to realize the threefold purpose of education, close quote. It's a church today whose educational system is based on options, choices, not upon mandates. That's critically important to the work that you as principals and as council and committee members are doing, because without the ability to market these schools today, they will continue to close. Conversely, where we see really good communication programs in place, I'll talk more about those in a while, and really effective marketing programs in place, these schools thrive. In fact, today, 1/3 of the Catholic schools in this country have waiting lists. They are full and they have waiting lists. 2/3 don't. And so if you are in the latter category, we want to enhance your communication and marketing. If you're in the former category with a waiting list, congratulations, that's exactly where you want to be. So we'll go to the next slide and talk more about this need for marketing Catholic schools. What we have experienced over the last 15 years is that parents are continuing to exercise their choice in these schools, and they're demanding Catholic schools, but only under certain sets of circumstances. And I'm going to leave you kind of hanging on that. What are those certain sets of circumstances that parents are saying, okay, I'll put my child in a Catholic school, but only if you do, and there are 4 of those things. Only if you do these 4 things. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. Okay, the next slide that you have in front of you provides the definition of development. This is the broad definition that we are using throughout this entire process. Development, in this case, is not synonymous with fundraising, although the ability to attract money is one of the elements of a successful development program. Rather, development is both a process and a concept that holds the highest destiny of a school, can only be achieved if everyone is involved in the school in this process. Administrators, council members, committee members, teachers, support staff, all of us together. That means that as we look at the life of the school, we're going to analyze foundational documents. And so I've asked all of the councils and all of the principals over the course of the last year to look critically at your statements of philosophy, mission, vision, and the profile of the graduate at graduation. We're then taking you into strategic planning, which Mark's going to talk about much more tomorrow morning with all of the principals of the diocese. Then projecting those goals, where do you want to take the school, well into the future, 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And finally, developing the necessary steps to make that happen. Some of those steps I will share with you this evening. There are specific and proven strategies that can enhance your enrollment, create waiting lists, and attract money. Of course, you'd like to know what all of those are, because that's where you would like your schools to be. Heavily endowed, waiting lists for students to come in, and so on. The way we go about doing this definition of development is through a formula. We have formulas for almost everything you'll see during the course of this process. And Vicky's going to give us the formula here in just a second. There it is. Okay. How many of you have seen this already? Adam, you're batting 1,000 so far. This is good. No, really? Only 2? 3. Okay, so for those of you who have not seen this, rather than letting Adam tell us the entire story again, we're going to leave it for just a minute. What you're looking at on the left side of the screen is a classic business model in a capitalistic society. It comes directly out of a Harvard 501 course in entrepreneurial leadership and starting new businesses. And what you see on your slide, I want you to highlight just one thing. What it says is, in order to be successful and generate profit, that's the way it's supposed to work, generate profit, you have to have a product. But the product, it does not say this on your slide, so you have to write this in. The product has to be addressed from 2 different perspectives. What is the product's identity, and what is the product's positioning within a particular environment? What is a product identified as, and how is it positioned? And to illustrate this, since we might be here till 10 because I can get to tell more stories since so few of you heard the last set. I'd like to illustrate product identity and positioning with a beer story. You've heard the beer story before, right? No? No. All right. How many of you are familiar with Gablinger beer?
Oh, you did say this one.
Thank you. Yeah. Sometimes I think I'm going crazy and I don't say that. All right. Nobody is familiar with Gablinger? Too bad.
Did you bring any?
That is the right question. Very good, very good. No, I did not bring it. And the reason you haven't heard of Gablinger beer is it was developed 38 years ago. It was developed by a brewmaster at a major brewery who had experimented with the hops to sugar content in the brewing process and created the first light beer. It had a third fewer calories than regular beer. And the Gablinger organization was set up to market this beer. And their first of many mistakes, but their first big mistake was they hired a marketing manager from General Foods. He came from the Jell-O division of General Foods. And this clever fellow said in writing his marketing plan, most beer drinkers are men, so we already have a defined market of which Gablinger will get another piece of market share, a piece of the pie, if you will. So this clever fellow said, our marketing strategy is going to be aimed at women. Women are traditionally more calorie conscious than men. You can tell that by looking at me. And if we aim our beer at women, we'll open up a whole new beer drinking market and we'll have a piece or market share of a bigger pie. Bad strategy. At that point in time, women did not buy a whole lot of beer. And within 2 years, Gablinger filed for bankruptcy. The judge in the case ordered the formula for the beer locked up, thinking that it was ahead of its time, and eventually the formula could be sold and the creditors paid off. Have any of you heard of Miller Lite? Miller Lite is Gablinger, the formula purchased from the bankruptcy court. But when Miller Lite was introduced, how was it positioned? What was the product's identity? It was beer, but it was aimed at whom? Men. What kind of an image? Athletic image, right. Both spectator sports and participation. Had a third fewer calories. You can still go out and play football and drink beer or rugby or whatever. The same product, but completely repositioned. And what happened during the first 2 years of Miller Lite's introduction? Wildly successful, skyrocketed, right. Same product, repositioned with dramatically different results. Now I say that to you because when I worked with your teachers last year in a seminar called The Role of the Professional Educator in Marketing the Catholic School, one of the things I said to them was, the Catholic school in which you teach today looks, and indeed should look, much different than the Catholic school that any of you went to or that your parents went to. The demographic profile, the characteristics are significantly different, and therefore the school has to be positioned differently today if it's going to be effectively marketed. So on the right side of the screen, next to product, our essential product identity is quality Catholic education. Do you think that could be defined the same way in every area of the country? Probably not, you're right. In fact, you will see wild swings, as I'll share with you in a little while, about what parents perceive to be quality and religiosity given the demographic differences in different areas of the country and even within the same diocese. So I submit at this early stage that as we look at our communication programs, one of the first things you want to look at is how is our school defined internally using its foundational documents, and how is it perceived out there, outside of the immediate school community. More on that later. Back to our business model. So we now have a product. The second thing we want to do is price that product, right? Are all products in this country priced based on cost?
No.
Almost none, indeed. How many of you watch Shark Tank? what does Mr. Wonderful always ask? It's the margin,
Yeah.
right? Does he like margins of 10, 15, 20, 30%? Oh, no, he's a greedy guy, right? He likes margins of 200, 300, 400%, right? Most products in this country today are priced based upon a perception of what will sell at the highest possible price. That presumes that the consumer has a value proposition that says, yeah, this product is so worth it to me, I will pay any price. Now, I'm a victim of this. I've studied marketing in grad school, and I'm still a victim of it. Every morning, I'm traveling someplace. Every morning, I go to Starbucks, and I get a grande decaf non-fat latte, which I know they can put across the counter, including the cost of the barista, for about 90 cents. You know what they charge me for it?
$4.
Just about $4, yeah, depending on where you are. From a low of $3.65 to a high in every airport of about $4.25. But I pay that ridiculous price because I like that stuff. Is it worth it? No, it's probably not worth it. Pricing considerations are largely subjective, based on a perception of the value proposition. The 10 highest priced Catholic schools in the United States today all have waiting lists. All of them. Do you know what's the tuition, do you think? I tried this afternoon at St. Mary. The highest priced Catholic high school in the United States today, what's their tuition? Anybody want to guess?
25.
20, 25?
40.
No.
Higher than 40.
Higher than 40?
60.
Close.
Whoa.
$56,300 at Portsmouth Abbey, the Benedictine School in Newport, Rhode Island. $54,500 at San Domenico. Each of those have waiting lists, and so do the next 8. Pricing has very little to do with the academic quality, although it has a great deal to do with the perception of what my child will get there. We're going to return to that in a while. Back to our business model. We now have a product identified and positioned, effectively priced. Now we're going to place it within a particular environment. Now I'm not going to talk about that tonight because most of your schools are fixed. You can't move this building very easily, right, Joe? No, not very easily. So we're going to ignore that. The next P in our 5P analysis is promotion. In the business model, it suggests that you can promote any product, and that within the promotional process, you have to be able to target various markets. So we're going to talk about that here. For our purposes, we're going to look at the broader concept, marketing. How do we market each of your schools successfully to achieve 3 things? And I want you to think for a minute about what those 3 things might be. In our basic business model, it suggests that if we can effectively identify and position a product, price it, place it, promote it, it generates profit. And that, of course, is what the folks at Shark Tank are all about. On the right side of the screen, we're saying to you in the most simplistic terms that if your schools are going to be successful, educating students well, educating students within the faith, you would like that, and at capacity enrollment, they have to be able to evidence, show people what constitutes quality Catholic education within a particular environment. They have to evidence the fact that they are well managed. They have to have effective marketing programs, and if they do, they will attract people, pupils, and dollars. Now, to make that formula work, there are several steps, starting with basic understanding. Nights like tonight, or this lovely lady here said tonight as we were getting started, she actually has read some of my articles. No one has ever said that before. I'm so I write these things on a regular basis. I've been doing it for a long time, so I really appreciate that. We're going to start with understanding. We're going to move from understanding to commitment. It cannot be just the principal or just the superintendent or just the pastor. None of you can do it alone. If these schools are going to be wildly successful, it takes all of us. Understanding, committing to the process, involving more people, council members, committee members, faculty, staff, and then it requires a plan, a strategic plan for us to follow. Strategic from the Greek word strategos, to provide a general direction. We don't want Mark going in one direction, Joe going in one, Adam going in another. That would be kind of a Maginot Line approach. We don't want that. We want a similar direction. Even if we have a good, clear direction, there needs to be, especially now in 2014, an extensive communication program. One of my client schools, the parents demand communication on an hourly basis, about how their children are doing. And this school does that. I'll tell you how later on. We want a comprehensive communication program, and then we're going to talk next year at this time about various funding programs, but money, none of you need money yet, so we're not going to talk about that.
What?
Truth of the matter is, even if we introduced all of the components of funding programs, they won't work unless your communication programs are in place first. Funding follows clear vision and well-communicated programs. I didn't say that. That comes directly from Father James Heft in his brand new book called Catholic High Schools Facing the New Realities. If you haven't seen it, it's a great read. Catholic High Schools Facing the New Realities, Father Jim Heft, H-E-F-T. So we're going to concentrate today on the communications programs. Everything that we do in terms of communication and in terms of marketing is not going to be purely secular. It's going to be mission-driven. We're going to look at your foundational documents, philosophy, mission, vision, the profile of the grad at grad. That is then going to drive our strategic planning, which in turn will drive programs, policies, and procedures, and in turn, our ability to market the school for image, for enrollment, and resources. So, as we began the Strategic Management and Development Program, Mark keeps calling it the CSM program, but it's not. We just happen to be facilitating it. You're involved in, next slide, in a Strategic Management and Development Program. And we concentrated our first year efforts on asking principals, staff, and volunteers to look at their foundational documents and to clarify them and make them relevant for this particular point in time. Philosophy, mission, vision, and the profile of the grad at grad. We're now asking you, and Mark will say much more about this with the principals tomorrow morning, asking you to develop a formal written strategic plan for each school with clear goals and objectives in multiple areas of school life: Catholic identity, ownership, governance, enrollment, staffing, curriculum, planning, facilities, finances, and so on, so that there are clear directions internally for where we want to go and how we want to get there. The reason for that is that we want to ensure that our communication programs are grounded around this mission and targeted for specific goals and objectives. We've already been working with administrators and councils on enrollment management programs. We'll be finalizing those this year and ensuring that the board members are involved throughout. Remember our definition of development: a process and a concept that holds that the highest destiny of a school can only be achieved with the involvement of everyone. Okay, the next slide suggests that if we're going to be effective in our communication and marketing programs, you can market a school for these three things: for image, for enrollment, and for resources. But the only way that you can be successful over the long term in marketing for enrollment or resources is if you constantly pay attention to the school's image. Does every school have to market itself for image, do you think? What about a really successful school like Yale or Harvard or the University of Notre Dame? with a $600 million endowment. Do they need to pay attention to image? They do. They do. And it will probably then come as no surprise to you that every 5 years, the University of Notre Dame reviews and sometimes revises its mission statement. They have both a short and a long version of mission. For the 35 years that Father Theodore Hesburgh was president of Notre Dame, the short version of the mission statement said this: the University of Notre Dame will be a national will be a teaching and research university, Catholic university of national stature. I'm not doing well, and I only drank water tonight. I probably should have had beer. Anyway, the University of Notre Dame is a teaching and research Catholic university of national stature. When Father Hesburgh retired and Father Malloy became president, he assembled both the board and the corporate officers to revisit mission. One word was changed. Anybody know what that one word was? In the short version of the mission. National to international. For the 35 years that Father Hesburgh was president, Notre Dame operated its campus at Notre Dame, Indiana, just outside of South Bend, and one campus in Trafalgar Square in London. In the 18 years that Father Malloy was president, the university grew to have campuses in 17 countries around the world. Mission statements drive planning and they drive resourcing. How we define the image of each of your schools through our foundational documents is going to be very important to us in this program for the next 2 years. Now, in order to do that, we want to look at what constitutes elements of the mission. So now I want to go back to the quiz question that I left you with a little while ago, i.e., what are parents looking for? What should the image be like? Or you have public schools in the area. Your public schools are free, except for property taxes, I suppose. You have charter schools, free. So why would a parent choose to pay tuition to have their child in a Catholic school? The research, most of it done by a researcher named Valerie Lee, says this: there has to be a perception that my child will get a better academic quality education if I put the child here at Holy Name. Okay? Or clear religious values have to be not only taught, but integrated with the teaching learning process. Thirdly, that the school has to provide a safe, structured, disciplined, and nurturing environment. In the earliest research, and by the way, the original research was conducted in 1974 out of the National Opinion Research Center in Chicago, and produced those 3 elements. This research has been funded every 5 years by the Lilly Endowment in Indianapolis, and the research has been replicated. Right up until 2005, do you think those 3 reasons recur? They do. That's still what parents are looking for. But in the 1970 research, they were perceived to be co-equal. That is, a similar number of parents named each one. Do you think that's true today?
No.
No. What happens?
Religious values came out, or went down.
What, in some demographics, yes. We at Catholic School Management experimented with this. And we experimented purely based upon demographics. So we took the same research that Valerie used, same questions asked the same way, but we controlled for the environment. So when we conducted the research in the South Bronx in New York, in Watson, South Central Los Angeles, and in Pilsen, South Chicago, what did we get from parents first? Safety, structure, and discipline. Absolutely. Followed by better academic quality. For those 2, I will pay tuition. Same research conducted the same way, but this time the research was conducted in Greenwich, Connecticut, Palm Beach County, Florida, and Marin County, California.
Academics.
It had to be dramatically better academic quality. Guess putting it on that slope is not going to work. Sorry. And the same research conducted the same way, this time in Wichita, Kansas, Peoria, Illinois, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Religious values.
Why? Religious values is right. Bible Belt areas. So the perceptions, not the reality, but the perceptions change. This is part of helping to identify what constitutes the image of your school and the image that you want to put forward in positioning your product within a particular environment. In the most recent research, a fourth has been added. The three still stay, but now parents are also looking for an appropriate array of co-curricular and extracurricular activities. So now 4 key factors to influence image. So whether you have a robotics program, a mock trial program, debate program, math club, those have to be part. Every school doesn't necessarily have to have a championship football team, but an appropriate array of co-curricular and extracurricular activities. In saying this, I'm suggesting that as we design marketing and communication programs for your schools, we are consistently going to focus on image. In some cases, we'll try to enhance or strengthen image. In some cases, we may want to completely overcome image or change the image. And many products and services have done that over the year, to change the image, just like Gavlinger to Miller Lite. And you can change image through program changes, through marketing or communication, lots of different ways. And so we'll look at those definitively. So I've used the term marketing several times. If I say marketing to you, what comes to mind? What are some of the synonyms that might be conjured up? Advertising. Perfect. That's usually first. What else? Promotion, right? Selling. Packaging.
Features.
Sure. All of those. And they are all indeed components of marketing. So as we're going to use the term here, and this comes directly out of the Kotler-Fox book, marketing involves the research, the analysis, the planning, the implementation, and the control of carefully formulated programs designed to bring about voluntary exchange relationships with specifically targeted markets. Long definition, but look at the operative phrases which are highlighted in blue. Targeted audiences. You cannot market Catholic schools generically. You could in 1910, but you cannot do that today. Targeted markets. Voluntary exchange relationships. These schools are no longer being mandated by the bishops or anyone else. Therefore, whether you're marketing for enrollment or for money, resources, there are specific targeted markets that you will be identifying and approaching. And to create those voluntary exchange relationships, we're developing programs based on some research, not just the best idea that the superintendent had this month, which I'm sure there are many, but research followed by programming to create to create voluntary exchange relationships with targeted markets. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So we're going to focus on identifying these markets using this kind of a definition of marketing throughout your work. For schools at either the elementary or secondary level to be successful in this, they need to look at their marketing preparation the following ways. First, what are the foundational documents? Are they clear? Are they too relevant? Is it appropriate, our philosophy, our mission, to this environment today? Even to schools that might be run by the same religious order. There are 46 Jesuit high schools. Do you think they all have the same mission statements? Oh, no, they're all different. There are 26 Benedictine schools, all with different mission statements. Mission statements should be targeted to the demographic profile of the area served. Now, in your area, schools in Lance might be different than in the Sioux or in Marquette, or Escanaba, I should have said that first, since that's where we are, the host. We want to be able to differentiate as we begin our marketing programs. So we're going to pay attention to all of those. Parents today, older generation Y, recent parents, are always going to look at, if I pay tuition to have my child at your school, what will that child look like 8 or 9 years later upon graduation? A written profile of the graduate at graduation. What will that child look like academically, socially, physically, spiritually, and so on. And so we've asked you to develop those. We're also asking you to develop a written strategic plan, an enrollment management plan, and some of you already have the sample plans that I've provided. I've given Vicki additional sample plans today. And starting this week, we'll be looking at communication plans for each of your schools. Sir, thank you.
Yeah. The foundational documents seem pretty critical to me.
They are.
Where does the vision start? And you mentioned that you had worked with the administrators and some of the teachers.
Yes.
So is that where those foundational documents start?
Yes. With the staff primarily. But this is a really good question. So let me just take a couple of minutes and expound upon that a little bit. Every Catholic school has a very similar statement of philosophy. The statement of philosophy talks about what your school is called to be. And as such, in your statement of philosophy should be the following phrases. This school, whatever it is, exists primarily to integrate elements of Catholic faith with learning. That's your rationale for existence. It's your philosophical underpinning. We also exist philosophically to teach gospel values, to provide opportunities for worship, to educate for service, and to build community within the school, within the parishes, and so on. Now, the language may be a little more flowery, it may be modified, but essentially those elements are going to appear in every mission statement, and every philosophy statement. I got ahead of myself. By contrast, the statement of mission, the second document, is more specific. It talks about what the school is called to do, whom it is to serve, and how it is to serve. So a mission statement is much less flowery, talks about the grade structure. Holy Name School provides a high-quality Catholic elementary education to students in grades, where do you start? Pre-K to 8. Okay. So that would be an element of mission. It would also talk about the way that it teaches. Are we able to serve students with learning differences, students with special gifts, and so on? So much more specificity in the statement of mission. The statement of vision talks about what you aspire to be, where you would like to go. And I guess the best one of this is we have a search division of our company. We do a lot of searches for superintendents, principals, presidents. And probably my all-time favorite one occurred 12 years ago for Bishop O'Dowd High School in Oakland, California. The bishop, Vigneron, who's now in Detroit, was very concerned about his largest high school, Bishop O'Dowd, which had enrollment declines to just over 60% of capacity. The school was in serious trouble. It was also staffed and administered by a religious community out of Canada that had been there for 30-something years. And in doing an assessment of that school, it became very clear that this order was not doing a good job, and they were kind of sending the bottom of the barrel people to O'Dowd and keeping their better people for their own schools, which I suppose was understandable. Not good, but understandable. Anyway, he got rid of all them, and then we did a search for a president. We had 7 candidates come in for interviews, and one man, Steve Phelps, came in, and we always asked the same question of the candidates. And one of the questions in the sequence was, and what would be your vision for the future of Bishop O'Dowd High School? And most of the candidates struggle with that. Well, I haven't been here yet. I need to get to know the staff. I need to know the program. Steve Phelps, with no hesitation, said, within 5 years, Bishop O'Dowd will be the most technologically advanced high school in the Bay Area. Of course, he got hired. He's still there, and indeed, Bishop O'Dowd is not only, when he took over, it had 630 students. Today, Bishop O'Dowd has 1,250 students and a waiting list, and it is the most technologically advanced high school in the Bay Area, and it's thriving. Vision statements are forward-looking, they're creative, and like this one, they're going to take some resources if they're going to be actualized. But part of the president's job was to go out and attract those resources. The fourth statement was the profile of the grad, which in very specific terms talks about what the graduate is going to look like in each of those major areas. And we have samples of those for you. And as you're suggesting, these do become the basis for most of our marketing programs. So I hope that was helpful, even though it was a little bit of a digression. If we look at the next, yes? No. If we look at the next slide, there's something called, in marketing terms, the marketing mantra. And it essentially means that if you're going to be successful at this thing called marketing, you need to be able to deliver the right message to the right person in the right way at the right time. How many of you are married? All right. Have you ever come home from a day and wanted to share something with your spouse and you said, I want ta-da, 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 and you realize the spouse is completely not paying any attention at all. Now this usually happens with the wife saying to the husband, I will confess, but you've experienced this, right? The right person to the right time, the right message to the right person in the right way at the right time. That is very true in terms of marketing an institution. You need to be able to be very selective in terms of when you're presenting a certain pitch. And, let's be blunt, do you want to say the same thing to a 28-year-old parent of a 3-year-old considering coming to pre-K as you might say to a 64-year-old prospective donor, both about Holy Name School? Or would we want to tailor the message? Absolutely. And while that may be somewhat dramatic, the fact of the matter is that if you're going to market to voluntary exchange relationships with specifically targeted markets, you've heard that before, tailoring the message to the right person in the right way at the right time is all important to you. And so as you who are on these communication committees, and I hope you're all going out of here saying, yes, I will say yes to the principal or the pastor who asked me, I'm going to do this. You're all in the back row going to do that, right? Yes? Yes? Okay. So we want to look at what are these messages. Let's start with the message. In terms of the right message, we're going to use the basic research. Remember, one of the components as to why a parent would choose a Catholic school for the education of their children is the perception of better academic quality. How do you evidence that? Well, best practices suggest you need to be able to publish test scores, and parents are looking for, is my child here or here? That doesn't matter. And I have 4 children. They were at various levels coming in. But the parental expectation is that each year from grade 1 to 2, 3 to 4, the child is going to progress. They won't all necessarily be at the same point. But your test scores should be able to evidence that you are a fine school that produces academic results for children. We'll have much more to say about this with principals tomorrow. Honor rolls, student-teacher ratios, graduation high school acceptances, the integration of technology with the teaching-learning process. All of these characteristics help you define and refine the message about why your school. Does that make sense? All right, let's look at the second characteristic. Religious values. Okay. Here, how do you integrate values throughout the curriculum? Some schools pick a gospel value a month: respect, tolerance, love, patience, and so on. Others will focus on grade level appropriate worship opportunities. Every child before leaving pre-K4 will know how to appropriately bless themselves, will know grace before meals, grace after meals, and so on. And you can go right on through the grades. My favorite is to have students in the junior high school get rid of their religion texts and just take out their iPads or their phones. Say, all right, this side of the room, you're going to have one project, this side, you're going to have another, this side's another. And for this group, I'd like you to do just a quick research. You can do it all online and write a one-page paper on Subiaco. Subiaco, your friends can help with this. It's not a spaghetti sauce. S-U-B-I-A-C-O. My friends here who are laughing at you now say, would like you to write a paper on Monte Cassino. It's not the newest Native American gaming. Monte Cassino. You already have this, don't you, Father? And this, folks, I'd like you to write a paper on Benedict, not the one recently sainted, the older Benedict. Anybody know what I just did?
You talked about Saint Benedict, where he had his first monastery, where he built his first monastery.
Right. And the kids, as they're now going out to do these papers, are going to be texting their friends. Are you kidding? He's got us all writing the same paper. So you've integrated technology with the teaching learning process. You've brought out dimensions of faith which they probably would not have been exposed to otherwise. Be creative. By the way, the kids love it. Let's go to the next slide. Structure, safety, discipline. Again, we want to be able to have an environment of consistent respect across all grade levels, where issues of bullying or perceived bullying are addressed immediately, where even before those have to come up, there is evidence of respect at all levels. Effective classroom management. It might be a Baldwin approach to education where every class from second grade on writes its own mission statement. How do they, as a class, want to operate? Student mentoring, whether it's 8th graders partnered in prayer with 1st graders or Big Brother, Big Sisters programs, and so on. Tailoring the message. There should be another one here, it's not here yet, on appropriate co-curricular and extracurricular activities. So one of the schools I've recently worked with that was losing enrollment, this is a very affluent suburb. The school is competing with very fine public schools, and they were losing enrollment by putting in a debate program for 7th and 8th graders and a mock trial program. It elevated the status of the school, and we were able to use that in the communication programs to enhance both image and enrollment. Have I beat that horse of message to death?
I have a question. You know, you're talking about marketing, and I run into difficulty trying to market what you're doing to my people at the school, and they say that this whole concept or even the wording of marketing, it just sounds like, you know, image conscious and more superficial. Is there any other way to present this? That's the question I have.
Is there any other way to present
Other than marketing?
the importance of a Catholic school within a particular community?
Not, maybe that's the best way to talk about it.
Interestingly enough, in this day and age, in this kind of an environment within the United States, probably not. We used to be able to, in Europe, not have to do much marketing, but we're doing now as much work in Belgium and in England on these kind of issues as we are here. And the truth of the matter is that those schools that have adopted really good marketing programs have seen their enrollment soar. So I guess my answer is yes.
Actually, I don't think you understood the question because I didn't do it very well.
Okay.
what I'm asking is there any other way to present the whole marketing idea in a Catholic way that doesn't sound like it smacks of the secular approach to things? Maybe-
Sure.
Maybe I can help with this.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about the connotation
Yeah,
of marketing?
yeah, exactly.
And I think really what he's talking about is tell me how to communicate
Yeah.
my ideas, what I want to do, rather than get the marketing turned out of the way and tell me what I really need to do.
Does that
Mhm.
help?
Exactly.
And he's right. We're going to talk about these here extensively, and I'll be talking about it for the next 3 years with the principals extensively. But the way the materials come out will be very Catholic, will be very faith-oriented, will not, and we're not going to talk about the marketing pieces.
Right.
You're about to get a brochure, ta-dum. But we will ensure that the research behind any of those communication pieces is sound. So I did misunderstand. I'm sorry about that, but thank you. Okay, so let's leave the message and talk about delivering the right message to the right person. I again shared this with the faculty when I met with them. How many of you have seen this research before? It's called the Millennials to Boomers Research on Current Generations. The research itself is about 1,200 pages. There are several books on it since. The most recent one is called The Age Curve, and it's a wonderful piece on understanding how you communicate with different constituencies. So look at this. Ages 84 to 100, a little over 100, GI generation. Silent generation, ages 67 to about 85, baby boomers 48 to 66, Generation X 30 to 47, Generation Y age 11 to about 30. Look at the numbers of live births. This slide is several years old, 3 years old now. 75 million live births in Generation Y. Do you think those people think and process information the same way as baby boomers? Not at all. Radically different. And so the way we communicate with people in these different generations needs to be different as well. The research goes on to suggest that for every generation, we can change that, there are defining events leading to generational values, defining who they are, and in turn defining how they act. Let me give you an example. For the silent generation, you had, can we just go back one more? Go back. One more, there we go. For the GI and silent generation, defining events would have included World War II, the bombing of Hiroshima, and so on. Very significant. Their generational values, loyalty, respect, honesty, duty before pleasure, all of those very clear, defining who they were. Trustworthy, loyal, dedicated to the church. You will not find any of those descriptors in baby boomers, Generation X, or Generation Y. A generation that the most recent CARA research, the Center for Applied Research on the Apostolate, calls Generation Y the generation most further removed from institutional religion than any in history. When I first came to work for the church in 1970, according to the official Catholic directory, 62% of baptized Catholics attended Mass on a regular basis. You know what the number is now? Just over 20%, yeah, and declining. And in some areas it's already into the teens. So these generational differences are very significant to us. Therefore, now we can go to the next slide with the circle. We're going to ask each committee to be able to identify the constituencies with whom you would like to communicate. And we'll start with those closest of the concentric circles to the center. Students, hopefully teachers, support staff, principals are communicating with students day in and day out. For the principals, I will give you a letter tomorrow. We experimented with a school where we said to the preschool teachers, now this was a school that in the past, along with all of its neighbors, had a difficult time converting preschoolers into kindergartners. Parents would put them in the preschool, they'd stay there for a while and then leave and go someplace else. One strategy, we had every preschool teacher in March write a narrative letter following a pattern, an outline, to the parents saying, after a year with your child, this is what I found. And they were wonderful letters. They talked about the good things that Mark or Joe or whoever in the class had done. And after just one March of doing that, what do you think the conversion rate from pre-K to kindergarten was? 99%. Because the letter said to parents, your child is special. I have recognized that. And not only am I sending this letter to you, but I'm sending it to the kindergarten teacher at Holy Name who's preparing to receive your child as well. By the way, you know where those letters ended up?
Scrapbooks.
Scrapbooks, on the refrigerator, copied and mailed to grandparents. Image first, okay? So, beyond students, we want to talk on a regular basis to faculty and staff, to school board or council members. I can't tell you how many schools I go into to find that the council or board members do not receive the weekly principal news notes. That's not good. Council members should be receiving the same information as parents should. Parents themselves, and then as we move further out, grandparents. Do you think they have an interest in knowing what's happening with their grandchild, their precious grandchild, in your Catholic school? They do. And by the way, they're great donors. We're not talking about that till next year, though. Parents of alums, individuals within the business, professional, and civic community. So we're suggesting that there are different communication strategies for each of these publics. The next series of slides, the next slide that you have just defines those a little further. I'm not going to go through them with you now, just in the interest of time. But to continue with our definition, remember, research, analysis, planning, the decision as to where a child is going to elementary school is not made by parents, even if both parents are at home. In fact, Dad doesn't even show up in the top 5 influencers. Some of us were happy just to be notified after the fact. Look, Mom makes the decision in over 70% of the cases, and the decision is made by Mom by the time the child's 3.5. Now that research is now 6 years old. We suggest that that is now probably age 2. And for Generation X, the primary influencers, which is when this research was done, mother's friends. Now, I have a daughter who's a Generation Xer. Her name's Katie. And when I talked to her about this research, without showing it to her, I said, when your oldest, Colin, was, sorry, that's my other child. When Ryan was getting ready to go to school, who did you talk to? I talked to other kids at St. Matthew, their mothers. I talked to my friends. It followed this exactly. Then the research said mother's mother, her sisters, the extended family, and that's particularly true in Hispanic and Asian families. The extended family plays a big role. And then your teachers, if they're well known within the community, well liked, well respected. Now, the new research is this, for Generation Y. These are parents up to about age 32 whose children are now of preschool age, 0 to 4. If you read all of the research going back to the generational differences, you would have found that one of the characteristics for Generation X was independent but it was important for them to talk to their friends. For Generation Y, age 32 and under, one of the characteristics is codependence. So I have a child in that category as well, and they live in Wisconsin. And so I don't get to see them as often, but last summer I told their teachers this as well. Every time I'd go from Connecticut to Wisconsin to visit them, they knew I was coming. I never once went to their house that there weren't 2 or 3 other couples there. I really think they all live together. Going into their house is like walking into the TV show Friends, the married version. They are always together. They do everything together. And so staying for dinner one night, we were sitting outside at a big picnic table having dinner, and my daughter-in-law was sitting at the end of the table where you are, and there was a lull in the conversation, which was unusual, I should add. But I had a chance to say, and Sarah, so Colin is now 2 years old. Have you started to talk about where he's going to school? Knowing full well that the parish that they go to is just a couple of blocks away. So I'm looking at Sarah asking this question. Her best friend Mara, who's sitting right here, says, oh yes, we've talked about that. Now, in my experience, that would never happen, but that doesn't surprise some of you at all. Huh? The way decisions are made is much different. Therefore, your ability to communicate with, particularly these Generation Y parents, has to be much different. My second daughter, Betsy, also has 2 children. There's a pattern here. And she lives in Barrington, Rhode Island. And when Betsy registered her oldest son, Blake, at St. Luke's School, right away she was asked to join the marketing committee and become a parent ambassador. So Betsy's primary role as a parent ambassador is to visit pre-baptismal instruction programs with another young mom, and they talk about the wonderful things going on at St. Luke's School. They don't have to do a hard sell. The baby's only 2 months old and about to be baptized. But they, the ambassadors, maintain contact with those mothers for the next 4 years. And at St. Luke, they send a coupon worth $100 on the anniversary of baptism for each of the next 4 years, so that when the child's ready to go to kindergarten, there's already $500 off the tuition. Now, strategies that are particular to a generation or to the right person. The next slide talks about the same research for high schools, but you don't have any high schools, so we're going to skip right over that. Thank you very much. In terms of communication strategies, Father?
Before we move in another direction, it would seem to me that our mission should include more than just traditionally defined success stories of family life. For example, what about there's so many families that are dysfunctional, and we really want to try and reach out to them. Our outreach should include more than just what I'm perceiving this to be. Also, homeschoolers. How do we attract homeschoolers?
Yes.
And they're doing a wonderful job with their children, of course, but these are 2 areas that I don't see included in this approach.
Yeah, it was not included in the research. It will be in the next replication of the research for sure. And again, for those schools that have paid particular attention to it, the only good way that we have found to be able to reach those families who have made decisions to homeschool their children is personal interaction. The mom ambassadors are playing a huge role in then talking one-on-one with families about what are the benefits of homeschooling on the one side, what are the benefits of socialization and involvement in the Catholic school on the other. And those have been very effective. I wish I had some specific examples, but I don't, but I will work on that.
And then as far as the dysfunctional part, that's more challenging.
It is, but I assure you that we've got lots of research on, and it just depends on how you define the family. So, In some of our schools, right now, we have client schools in Watts in Los Angeles. Bourbon Day comes to mind. And so does St. Francis Xavier Cabrini on Imperial Boulevard, where I don't think we have one intact family, mom, dad, children at all. So we're looking about every possible combination of arrangements, guardians, both parents in jail, all kinds of things. And again, the outreach has had to be through the Parent Ambassador Program, where individuals reached individuals and got to understand their story and were able to then explain to them why this is the right place for their child. Very, very good point. As we leave this area and look at the research, we're looking now at differences in how you communicate. And you're going to see over the next 20 minutes or so that we will use all of these, whether it's text messaging, voicemail, internet, YouTube videos. I showed one to a committee this afternoon. If we have time, I'll show you some of these. As opposed to direct mail pieces, postcards to baby boomers, which have a much different impact. So yes, we're going to differentiate the type of communication that you have with different publics. The next 3 slides that you have provide additional information on the best communication approaches, and we'll now go to the matrix. So for those of you who have said yes to, I'd love to be on this communication committee, your very first task, oh, I thought you were looking, there's nobody behind you. So you just had to say yes. So the very first task of the communication committee is to be able to fill out this matrix. And it's simply answering the question, what do we do now and when do we do it? How do we communicate and with what frequency to students, faculty, staff, and each of the publics that you saw in those concentric circles. This task, what are we doing now and how often are we doing it, is important. We need to understand the starting point. And through your annual parent satisfaction surveys, which we introduced this past year, we're going to continue to test the effectiveness of your current communication strategies. As we begin then, remember, research, analysis, planning. As we begin then to analyze this, we want to look at, is the mix right? Whether we're sending postcards, state of the school messages, weekly news notes, or something else. Is it doing the right thing? Do we see pictures that are infused with happy children, unique aspects of the program, high quality education? Are they true to the mission, faith-filled, goal-oriented, and so on? And are we getting good information about the school, the mission of the school, the needs of the school? Are we getting all of that into our communication pieces? Now, remember the school I told you about before that had to communicate with preschool parents on an hourly basis? Anybody want to guess where that school is? Well, let me just do it this way. Do you think it's in a low-income area, a middle-income area, or a very high-income area? High-income area, obnoxious, huh? Anybody want to guess where?
San Francisco?
Close. Malibu. Malibu. It's Our Lady of Malibu. There really is an Our Lady of Malibu. And their logo is not Mary on a surfboard, but a can. This is a real school. It sits on Winter Haven Road in Malibu. And at the parent satisfaction surveys, we knew that we were under-enrolled in pre-K and kindergarten. But there's lots of competition. Now, money is not an issue for most families in Malibu. It is for some. There's lots of service workers there as well. But for most, it was not an issue. But when we actually surveyed parents about what they liked and didn't like, we heard over and over again there's inadequate communication. Now, the principal, Suzanne Ricci, has a great communication package. It goes home every Friday. It has lots of information. And they said, no, we're teachers. We want more from the teachers. How much more? Like every day? Now, you have to understand that many of these families, if they board their dog while they are going on vacation, can access, where did I put my phone? Video of the dog in the kennel on the phone. Yeah, geez, are you kidding me? Therefore, in addition to parent ambassadors, Our Lady of Malibu, we now have communication moms. There are 3 of them. They come in for 2 hours in the morning with their iPhones, and they're able to say, oh, look at that. Joe has his book open. He's paying attention. We're going to text this to Mom. I am not making this up. That level of communication became all important. And at the end of the year, the same kind of letters that you saw today go from every teacher, so that there is a synopsis of what Joey did this week in the school. We're going to ask you to define within your communication matrices, based on your parent needs, what is the mix of information that you're going to include. And you're going to do that, we'll give you formulas for it, and there are samples in your notebooks, by tearing apart the definition. Carefully formulated programs, the right message, the right way, the right time, specifically targeted audiences. We're not going to say the same thing to a parent of a 3-year-old as we are to a prospective donor who might be in his 60s, and so on. So that having been said, we go to the next slide, and we look at year 2. We're going to look at implementing your strategic goals, and for those schools that have not yet defined strategic goals, we're going to work with you in that area to produce a strategic plan. Look at the bottom of the slide. In your communication program, we would like to look at the following. Developing a case statement. This, you're not going to publish it. This is an internal document. There are samples in your notebook. And it simply is a document that we, the editors of the newsletter, we, the designers of the postcards, we, the designer of the website, can use to extract consistent information on the school. A case statement. What is the case for support for this school? We'll draw from our foundational documents. We will draw from our strategic plan. We'll draw from the experiences of teachers. But within that case statement, Father's point now becomes very important. One of those will be the, why should a homeschooler consider this school for the education of their children or any part of their education? So the case statement becomes a fairly long but internal document. Secondly, we're going to introduce to you quarterly newsletters that you can send out to different publics. These would include grandparents, alums, alumni parents, as well as your current parent population. You have some information on those in the packets that you have received, but every time I come, we'll be giving you additional samples of what newsletters for external publics look like. And they take lots of different forms, but they're all designed primarily to communicate with external publics. That is, not your current parents, although they will receive one, but alums, alumni parents, the business community, the parent community, and so on. And whether you use shiny, glossy paper or plain paper, whether it is heavily covered with pictures, like this, or largely text, you will define that based upon the needs of your particular community. And we'll have samples of these for you throughout. There will be actually a subcommittee of communication that we'll be looking for, and you'll see it defined in your notebook. There'll be an overall editor, several writers, a photographer, somebody to do layout, to produce those quarterly newsletters. We typically recommend 3 to 4 of those a year. And if you're worried about the budget for them, don't. Once you send the first issue, we'll stuff in an envelope and make it a gift from students to their grandparents, whether it be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 grandparents, there might be that many around now, they, even unsolicited, tend to send in enough gifts to cover the whole printing for the first year. So we'll look at those individuals who should be receiving those letters. We'll also be looking at more extensive electronic communication, enhancement of your websites, the utilization of YouTube, Twitter accounts, Instagram, and others to ensure that we're getting our message out to another public. I'll show to you if we have time. Do we have internet access on that from here?
No.
No. Maybe we won't show it. We'll see. We're also going to look at publishing an annual report each and every year so that there is both transparency and accountability for your constituencies. And the annual report will not only include financial information, but perhaps most importantly, it will include the finances in a graphic form, an overview of the year, what were the accomplishments and achievement of the school, as well as a donor listing from your annual fund, which will be starting hopefully at all of your schools within a year. That's the part about marketing for resources. We'll also be looking at inserts that some of you are already starting on parish bulletins. I'd love to see a monthly insert on Our Graduates Speak for Themselves that does a profile of one of your school graduates, or specific categories of graduates who have been graduates successful in area colleges, or graduates who have been successful in law, or medicine, or science, or whatever you pick. The very best way to market a Catholic elementary school without really marketing it is by example. Look at the wonderful things that have happened to these people who spent 8, 9, 10 years in this school. Does that make sense? So you're seeing here the component parts of the communication program that we're asking you to participate in. Okay. The next slide shows a communication matrix, and once decisions have now been made on your future, this communication matrix will now be enhanced with not only what you're now doing, but what you will be doing in the following year. We'll upgrade this each and every year from this point out to enhance communication to where you feel it's appropriate for your school. And the fact of the matter is that every school will not look exactly the same. They'll be varied by needs and demographic profiles. There will also be, next slide, a distribution matrix that takes the issues that you're now using, like the state of the school message, that may be initially sent out in a letter format by the principal every January, which is fairly typical. But more and more, we're looking at state of the school reports being sent out to parents and others on constant contact or other form that can be delivered right to their iPhones. Because, as you know, people tend to be multitaskers, and this way we give them something else to read while they're driving on the interstates, which people tend to do on a regular basis while they're drinking coffee, eating, and shaving. I didn't say that out loud, I trust that. And we'll be filling out the distribution matrix. So, for example, your annual report may go out in hard copy like the one I just showed you, but it may also be a single page on your website. Does that make sense? So we'll be looking at multiple vehicles for this. There's a sample completed communication matrix in your packet. There may be 2 or 3 of them in there. And I just wanted to have you take a look at what was happening. Now, this particular school, as you can see, is looking to the future to produce a recruitment brochure that can be made available in hard copy. They have not done it yet, and therefore you see no checks in that box. So that's a very quick overview of communication. Now we're going to turn our attention to the specific elements of each of these. So we'll start with the case statement. In your packet, I have included not only these definitions, but I've included samples. And, God bless you, and during each of the visits, I'll try and bring additional samples. I'm watching this table carefully because I know they're trying to steal these samples, but they'll come back, I know that. Oh, Father doesn't have his, oh, you don't have your stole with you. No confessions tonight, sorry.
We thought they were free.
I thought they were free.
I want to read it when
We'll donate.
Anyway, let's start with the case statement. A clearly written narrative based on the consensus of the school's key leaders that explains where the school has been, its history, where it is today, where it's likely to go, what are your future goals, and why people should invest in it. This is an incredibly useful and important tool for you. Let me give you an example. One of the schools involved in this program, All Saints in Richmond, Virginia, it's an inner city school. They're now in their 3rd year of the Strategic Management and Development Program. As part of their strategic plan, they wanted to move from computer labs, it's a no pre-K, K through 8 school. They wanted to move from computer labs to a one-to-one device, probably iPad program. But obviously they needed more money to do that. Within the case statement, they indicated that this was one of the goals, and here was the timeline. They achieved within 2 years, in addition to their annual fund, through this man who came to them, his name was Barrett, and said, I'd like to help you sponsor a breakfast. Has to be really quick. I want everybody in and out in 2 hours, but I'm going to bring most of my business friends to this, and I want you to show kids working at computers and talk to us about what this is going to do. And of course, these guys all came, drank a lot of coffee, ate some scrambled eggs, were out, and they left check after check after check after check and said, yes, this is a really good cause. The case statement is going to provide for you, in light of your strategic plan, the elements of what your future should look like in each of these schools. Then we'll make determinations about how we use that. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Case statement, an internal document.
Who typically generates that when you say institutions, key leaders? Who for the school is generally coming up with that?
It could be teachers. It's usually a small writing committee. It might be 4 to 5 people. They might work on Google Docs or something like that so they can share information. But administrator, teacher, council member, communication committee member, that is a really good point that I should have thought of. Okay, let's go to the next thing. The content, again, I'm not going to go through this in any detail because it's in there, but if at all possible, try and look at those bonus features in developing your case. It should be future-oriented. Not only what are our needs, but what would we like to have? What would really make this school outstanding within this community? And to try and do it from the donor's perspective. Okay, next slide. The preparation process, we've gone through this introduction overview. We're going to assign, oh, it is here, writers, authors for the case. There's a small committee. Information gathering from different constituencies. We're going to probably go to 3 or 4 drafts of the case before it's completed, and it will then be used as the foundation for communication and marketing efforts as well as for funding efforts. So, communication committee formed. The first task was preparing the communication matrix. What are we currently sending out and how often? Next, we're going to create the communication plan. What do we want to do? Now we're creating the case statement. Intern. With that completed, we're going to complete a comprehensive communication plan. Next slide. Based on the case statement, the written communication plan should include the following. What will be produced in hard copy format, in postcard format, on the website, or in some other format? Why it's being produced. Is it to inform, to educate, to promote, to solicit money? Any of those would be important. How often? weekly, monthly, quarterly. How is this going to be distributed? Electronically, through email addresses, U.S. Postal Service addresses, FedEx, whatever. And then finally, who's responsible for the various components? Writing, layout, editing, design, publication, and so on. A sample communication plan follows on the next 2 slides that you have in your packet, and we've just taken one from other schools to fill those out. Yours may look either similar or significantly different from them. As you look at what are the most effective or based upon best practices, what are the key publications? Go to the next slide. There we go. These are essentially the most effective for Catholic elementary schools. Quarterly newsletters. There's almost nothing that can replace these things in terms of positive image building, constantly keeping your constituencies informed, and because after the 2nd year you can include those little donation envelopes in them, they also produce a fair amount of money. If we do them electronically for some of your constituencies, remember, some would then have the opportunity to give online. For all of my mother's life, if it came from a Catholic organization and it had an envelope in it, she made a donation. That's just the way she was. It's highly unlikely that you would have gotten my mother to give online. By contrast, my son, just on principle, will not write a check, ever, ever, ever. If he can't give online, it doesn't happen. So segmenting constituencies is really important to you. Secondly, there will be an annual report, again in a spirit of both transparency and accountability. We are letting people know what they are giving to and where their money is going. By the way, an increasing number of major donors who have typically given to Catholic causes now do not want to be known as either major donors or philanthropists. Do you know what they want to be called? Yes, who said that? Investors. Investors. And in one diocese here in Michigan, they've already changed their policy manual to talk about the investors in Catholic state of favor. Investors in Catholic education. We want to continue to publish principal news notes talking about what's going on for parents on a regular basis, a state of the school message at least once a year on an interim basis, about 6 months prior to your annual report, to give an update with regard to the happenings of the school academically, religiously, socially, and so on.
Richard, on the state of the school, as principal, sometimes I would do those, say February,
Yep.
with people coming to the meeting, you know, and roll it out in person.
Yes.
Which way do you recommend being stronger, or do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference. That's a good point. A number of principals, including the school that my older daughter Katie's children go to, she does a verbal delivery and then say, oh, by the way, for those who want to read it, I've left the state of the school message in the back. Many of ours now will mail them first and then invite people to come in. One of our client principals, Frank Lawati, does coffee hours in the evening by grade to go through their elements of the state of the school message. I have no idea which one is better, and I don't think there's a real answer to that, except that it has to fit the culture of the school.
Just a question of, could we include endowments into this mix, or is that handled best separately? The whole question of endowment.
You really do want to get right to this money thing, don't you, Father? That is a really, really good question. The answer is no. We may not include either endowments or planned giving, which is the way you build endowments in this. And the reason for this, and I'm glad you asked the question. There is always a propensity within the Catholic Church to go right to how do we solicit more philanthropic dollars? Historically, we know that while older Catholics are very willing to make planned gifts for endowment purposes for churches, schools, seminaries, religious communities, particularly of women, that's great. But current generations tend not to do that unless they are well communicated with before cultivation and solicitation of the gift. Moreover, we're finding that where active cultivation and solicitation of gift has preceded the communication phase, it's a turnoff. People are saying, you've just come, you haven't talked to me for years, why are you coming to me for this now? So best practice says we build that in, but we build it in after we have a solid communication program, a solid program of annual giving, and through that program of annual giving, we can build in planned gifts. By the way, planned gifts means bequests through wills, life insurance gifts, charitable remainder trust, charitable leave trust, annuity trust, gifts of appreciated property, and the like. Where it happens really well, and many dioceses are seeing the benefit of this, one in the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois, huge gift from a family, their entire farm, massive operating farm that now funds 1/2 of the budget of this Catholic school. Was an amazing gift. The school at San Juan Capistrano, one of the missions in California, just got $1 million planned gift, all of it restricted to endowment to serve two purposes, either financial aid for families that cannot afford the school, but a portion also had to go to professional development of staff so that they continued to use technology. What a thoughtful gift. And I think they made it primarily because they were able to see through the newsletters the direction in which the school was going. But really, really good point. Okay, continuing down our list, media press releases. You want the name of the school out there periodically, and we'll be looking at someone in each school to prepare basic information on the things you do week in and week out that may become good information for the school. Many papers will not publish each week information about the school, but they will look for pieces that are, in their mind, newsworthy. So anything that a student or a class achieves, whether it's in the arts, music, athletics, academics, they'll probably publish. And it's not, if you watch baseball or football or basketball, you know how often coaches go out and ridicule or bother referees? And they almost never win those arguments, right? But what does it do? It makes the ref think that, oh, maybe I'm not being fair to this team, so they may get a questionable call later on. Newspapers kind of do the same thing. Holy Name's back here again with another press release. We've done 30 of those in the last month. We probably ought to lay off. But when you come back to the next one, oh, we haven't done anything for 2 weeks, we probably ought to put that in. That's probably one of those distasteful pieces of marketing. Persistence. We are also going to look at recruitment brochures. We know at the elementary level right now that in addition to the parent ambassadors for pre-baptismal instruction programs and word of mouth, social media is probably the most significant way for you to reach young families. This means YouTube videos, it means placement of regular photos and articles on Facebook, and it means a constantly updated web presence. If I had internet access, I'd show you a couple of these videos that elementary schools are using. I will show them to the principal. Did I show one the last time I was here? Yeah, the middle school, right? I've not shown the elementary with the happy song. So we'll try and go through those so that your principals can bring that information back and show you. But that social media mechanism is very, very cost effective. And by the way, your own students are the best producers of these. They absolutely love doing it, and they speak very well for the school. Okay, if we go to the next slide, we're talking about newsletters. That's the thing you see here. We're looking at, as I said, quarterly newsletters 4 times a year. However, one of these might be the annual report issue. So you're looking at a publication schedule that's there for you. Typically, they're 4 pages long. Sometimes they can be longer. You want to make it, however, cost effective. And so the subcommittee that's going to work on the newsletters, and as I come back, I'll be asking about them. Vicki will be monitoring the newsletters throughout. Vicki and I talked today about every 8 weeks we'll have a phone conference to see how your communication committees are working, what the marketing effort looks like, and she'll be gathering that information from you. My hope is, this is a commercial, if you are publishing one of these quarterly newsletters, you do want to put me on your mailing list. Not only because I would love to see what you're doing, and I do, but if I don't get newsletters, I don't donate. So when you get to your annual fund, if you expect a gift from me, I want communication first. So just a thought. We can now go to the annual report. The annual report issue here, once a year, typically in October. Why is the annual report published in October rather than June?
End of the year, donation.
More importantly, that's right. In June, you haven't gathered all of the information yet, likely. But we're going to, next year, introduce annual giving programs. And the kickoff to your annual giving is typically going to be in October. And so we would like you to have just seen, yes, this letter right here, because I'm going to look in here, which I just received, the letter, and I'm going to say, oh my gosh, yes, I did make a gift to this school last year. Now, this one only lists them. Most of that annual reports list by category. So I might have been in the $200 giving level, and I really like what they're doing. I might give them $500 or something. You want this fresh in people's mind right before your next solicitation. Does that make sense? Paul?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. The only problem is in our diocese, we're running against UPSCA, or UP Catholic Services.
Uh-huh.
That's October, late September going into October.
And do you have a prohibition on,
Sort of, yes.
what do you mean, sort of?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't think you'd want to publicize it too well because although I think we have a wonderful bishop at this moment, had it right along, but my problem is with the diocesan staff. They tend to run scared over conflicts of interest.
Oh, gotcha.
It's a competitive situation. The annual Catholic Service Appeal does not do as well in many parishes throughout the diocese as it does in a few.
Yes.
And I think there is likely to be criticism of a competing fundraising activity going on concurrently
Okay.
with the Catholic Service Appeal.
And how long does the Catholic Services Appeal last?
In some parishes, 2 to 3 weeks,
Okay.
and others 2 or 3 months.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, so we'll have to modify the timelines perhaps.
And then there are cash flow problems in different places depending on situations. For example, there are some parishes in our diocese that people have to wait 2 weeks to get their salaries paid when there's enough money in the bank to do it, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so we'll have, those are good points. We'll have to take those into consideration in designing any annual giving programs here. Excellent. Okay, you can read the rest on the annual report. In publishing your newsletters, I've given you in the notebook that you have in front of you samples of reverse timelines. They are on pages 44 and 45, and there is a table of contents there for you. And you see one on three. For every one of your publications, your quarterly newsletters, your case statement, your annual reports, I would encourage you to use the reverse timelines that are here. Human nature being what it is, most of us, if we're given a timeline, will by and large adhere to it. If we are not given a timeline, what happens? It doesn't get done. We tend to be procrastinators. Some would call it human nature. You can blame it on original sin or whatever you want. So we tend to push things off. The next one is principal news notes. Most of you are doing these now. They go home typically on a weekly basis. And younger parents are looking more and more for meaty information. Meaty, M-E-A-T-Y, information about the school. Specifically, those schools that are best postured for image are not only the schools that teach children well, but those that help parents be better parents. And so grade by grade in news notes, you want to take time to include things like parenting skills for the 4-year-olds, or how to deal with the issues, I was going to say problems, but I won't, of 8th grade boys. There are no such things, of course, we all know that, and so on down the list. More and more administrators getting rave reviews are holding in their news notes and or through grade level appropriate coffees specific topics on. And my daughter Betsy at St. Luke in Barrington, Rhode Island just went through one of these with her parent ambassador friends and their context on issues related to fine and gross motor skills for 3- and 4-year-olds. You need to know that? Don't kids just be kids? Apparently not. Apparently you need to know those things, but I didn't know that. But they had a great time. And it exposed more moms to St. Luke's. You see the importance of communication in this day and age, I hope, for the school.
Is this one communication that handles different grade levels, or is it a different communication, kind of like kindergarten through 3rd?
That's a really good question, and the answer for the vast majority of Catholic elementary schools is the former. It's one communication that typically goes home either weekly or every other week from principals, and, well, what are you doing? Are you sending news notes home?
Once a week.
Once a week? What day?
Fridays.
And how much of yours is going electronically now?
Oh, more than half.
More than half. Some parents are still requesting the hard copy. Does it go home in an envelope?
Mm-hmm.
Particular color?
Yeah, well, yeah, an envelope. What's the color? Orange?
Orange, yeah. Most schools have done the big orange envelope on Wednesday for some, and more parents are electing to have them electronically, but not all, and that's not unusual to hear, about half are still wanting the hard copies. So we'll modify those. Now, one of the principals that I talked about earlier today, Frank Lawati, who's been principal of this wonderful school for 38 years, I believe, he does grade level news notes every other week, and then supplements those on topic areas for coffees in the evening. I can't tell you what's going to work for each of your schools, but once I start seeing your case statement, it will begin to answer some of those questions. Okay, what did we get to after news notes? Oh, state of the school message, we've already talked about that. There's content there for you, and there's also a full sample, I hope. Is there a full sample in here? Oh, yes, pages 51 to 53. We'll give you a sample of what a state of the school message looks like, and I'll make others available to you in both hard copy and electronic. The next slide talks about media and press releases or news releases. Again, you're going to need to determine what should go on there. Do many of your communities currently have local newspapers, either weekly or monthly? What's the greatest frequency?
Daily.
You have dailies, and most. Do any of you have Patch, the electronic local news thing online? No Patch up here?
Yeah, we do.
You do?
You can submit online.
In our area.
Oh, good. And what is it?
I didn't know.
Oh, I
What
thought I
does it
heard
stand
another.
for? Well, some have, you can submit news releases online, but I'm not sure what that means.
Okay. more and more, those are becoming very, very attractive to young parents, particularly parents in their late 20s, early 30s, or the online version. So we'll try and build those in for you as well. I'll give to the principals tomorrow a blog spot where all of the things that we're talking about, we can go to the next slide, are included in sample format. Because so many dioceses have schools going through this program, Maria Rivera, who's our vice president, scans all of these every other month, draws out the best ones, what she considers best practice illustrations, and posts them to the blog spot. And so there's a whole series of these brochures, videos on there that you can look at. Again, we don't know if it would be beneficial for any of you to use these kinds of videos in promoting the school, but you'll explore that as part of the communication program. The next slide talks specifically about postcards. I just want to make one comment here. Again, there are multiple samples of these on our blog spot. Some schools have said, well, I created a postcard, we've sent it out to people in the area, but we got no response. Single postcards never work, never, ever, ever. Postcards only create awareness, and the research is very clear that you have to send a minimum of 4 to 6 with a planned frequency in order to get any remembrance of them by the constituencies that you're trying to reach. Okay, in terms of cost-effective marketing, we're looking at certainly word of mouth being no cost. You want people saying good things about your school. Those good things are going to come hopefully through your parent ambassador programs. I'm over time, I'm sorry about that. Through your parent ambassador programs and from students. I want to offer a caution. This past Saturday, I was at home. I went to Starbucks in the morning to buy my overly priced coffee. And when I got there, the line was out the door. So I stood in line. There was a woman standing in front of me. She looked familiar to me, but I was standing there waiting. When I finally got inside of Starbucks, she was right in front of me, looked to her right, and saw a colleague. And he was sitting at the counter correcting papers. And she said, hey, Paul, how you doing? She said, wow, correcting papers on a Saturday morning. And Paul said, I always come here, I get my coffee, I sit here, I can kind of say hello to people, but it's a great time. Within about 2.5 hours, I get all of my students' papers corrected. And she said, really? Do you read all of those? She said, I teach 5th grade, and she said, I only read the first paragraph at the end, and then I give them a grade. Now, me and several people around us looked at her like, and this one lady said out loud, I certainly would not want my child in your school. Wow. Word of mouth works both ways, and you have to kind of pay attention. I don't know if she must have been high or something. You're walking in Starbucks and you're saying something that's stupid. Anyway, and she ordered a stupid drink too. Soft little things. It was awful. Anyway. So we want positive word of mouth, but we also are going to supplement those with print media, electronic, and you're going to create the matrix of what the program should look like. The rest of these, I just want to skip to constituent database. If you have a database now that gathers information, whether it's Edline, My Student Progress, Power School, or one of those, that's fine for your current parents, but we're going to need to expand that to include past parents, parents of alums, the business community, the civic community, and others. And so we'll be looking at how you develop your database. We really don't care how you do it, as long as you can collect information on things like, well, let's go to the next slide, Vicki, for just a minute, and then we'll come back. We want to collect not just addresses, but all of this kind of information. Now let's go back. So you can use Access, FileMaker Pro, Blackbaud. You don't want to use Blackbaud, it's incredibly expensive. membership management system. GiftWorks is great and relatively inexpensive. Donor Perfect, eTap. There's a whole slew of database management systems. The newest one out is called Little Green Light. It's web-based, and for $30 a month you can store all of this in the cloud, and you don't have to maintain anything locally. So there's a lot of these, and we'll be looking with Vicki at what is best for each of your schools. But the fact of the matter is, you need a database, one, to be able to mail either in postal service format or electronically to people. And then, if I make a gift to you, I would really like it if you knew who I was when you write your thank you note. I have sat on a board for the Business School of Villanova for 7 years, Villanova University. And I just got a thank you for a fairly sizable gift. And the envelope was addressed to Mr. Richard Burke. And the salutation on the letter said, "Dear Sister Patricia." Oops. Now, I have to think that as they did this production run, everyone after me also got the wrong name. Anyway, Villanova is now off my giving list. So we're going to look at, if we can go to the next slide, and one after that, we're going to look at opportunities for both off-site, offline, and online giving. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on these next slides, except to say that increasingly social media in all of its formats, Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, Instagram, and YouTube, are increasingly important to the communication programs of Catholic elementary and secondary schools. So our hope is, and we'll talk with the principals more about this tomorrow, the first task is basically to form a communication committee. We want all of you to be involved in this exciting project. There's a fair amount of work here, and the more we spread that out among people, the better it's going to be. We'll move from formation of the committee to where are we now, i.e. the communication matrix, and then go right from there into case statement. And I hope that by this time next year, we'll all be publishing newsletters and annual reports. And I will now shut up and questions, issues, concerns.
As far as getting grandparents on there, did you just add that line onto the registration packet to get the...
I don't like to do that. This is a really good point that Joe's making. Could you add grandparent information to the registration form? Yes, you could, and somewhat. First of all, speaking of modern family, which father raised before, you really could have 6, 8, 10 grandparents in some schools today. What we have found works best in terms of best practices, when you publish your first newsletter, try and do it either just before Thanksgiving or just before Christmas. If it's just before Thanksgiving, you want to go out and buy a whole bunch of oversized orange envelopes that you're then going to ask the children to take home, and mom or dad or guardian is going to help fill in the address for the grandparents. You're going to stuff the envelope in, and the child's going to put in a note saying, "My school just started publishing this newsletter. This is my Thanksgiving or Christmas gift to you." As principal, you're going to have underneath there, "As principal of Holy Name." I don't want to be intrusive, but we're publishing our newsletter. If you would like to receive this on a regular basis, please fill in your information below and send it back in the envelope. So you're asking them for it. One, it's going to get you 90% of the addresses anyway, but now they have the option. Two, that little envelope there, very few are going to send back without saying, "Oh, it must cost them something to mail this, so yes, I want them to send it, so I'm going to stick in a check for $25 or $100 or whatever." It's a much better way to go about it. And to use the registration information to send a mailing, which later on, a year down the road, is going to have an envelope, it's a little bit presumptuous, so I prefer to do the gift thing. But that really good point. Had enough of communications. I apologize for going a little over this tonight.
Well, that was our fault.
Thank you, Father.
We kept interrupting you.
I appreciate your kindness. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Here are out there.